Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And without further ado, I'd like to bring in a cat who is part of a collective within the Brooklyn contingent that just seeks authenticity at all costs. I think in some ways he's one of these cats that is able to get out of his own way because he understands that when he's able to do that, he can channel information coming through him from the heavens, and that eventually goes into his apparatus and then out into the atmosphere, creating a higher collective consciousness in a myriad of different settings. And I've been after him for a while, and he's doing his thing. He's doing what he has to do in order to survive during this very interesting time and somewhat despotic time, especially as it relates to live touring music. But looking forward to breaking it down. Roy Williams, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Jake, how's it going?
That's great to hear you, brother. I didn't tell you this in advance, but. You know who hit me to you is the legendary John Lee Shannon. When I interviewed,
nice.
And he talked about you, and I don't know if he used the word virtuosic or virtuoso, but he said from a very early age you had basically, I mean maybe you were too young to really know it, but I just kind of wanted you to speak for yourself and sort of talk about when you recognized that you were a conduit for the music coming through you from the heavens.
At what age did that happen? It was pretty young because I grew up. My dad is a piano player and guitar player, just around the house. It was never his profession, but he was. He grew up in the '60s and '70s, and that was all the music that he was a fan of and plays really well. But again, not as a professional, but just as like a joyous thing to do. Yeah. So that was just the sound in my house was him playing Neil Young on the piano or the Beatles or Dylan or the band or whatever. And just in general, good music, not just music from that era, but also he always loved Benny Goodman and all the kind of classic big band stuff and anything good that was happening contemporary too. I remember growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, and he was still into Wilco and, other things that still were sounding like good music that were continuing to be made. So I was surrounded by that my whole life. And I'm the youngest of three brothers, and the older two are both musicians as well. So I kind of always, there's really not a time that I don't remember that if you hit every other key on a keyboard, it's a chord, or that or how to strum a G chord or an E minor. There really isn't. I don't remember not knowing at least that, because actually my parents just found it. They dug it up. It's a picture of me as like a baby, or young, just able to stand alongside my dad playing piano, and you can see he has a book. He doesn't read music, but he could see the chords,
sure.
These chord books or whatever. And the book is Buffalo Springfield.
Wow.
So, and like on my way home, or one of these tunes, or A Kind Woman or something is the song that's on the from the late '80s there. So it's kind of been in there forever. But I started really playing seriously when I was about 11. I started playing drums when I was really young, and then maybe I was like 4 or something. I started playing drums, and I played a bit, but I was like a kid doing kid stuff too. I played a lot of baseball and just like running around and doing all sorts of things. And then I started playing a lot when I was in 5th, 6th grade, I guess. So I guess like 11 years old, and pretty quickly got into learning the chords, but then being like, oh wait, what is that? These scales, or learning, trying to learn every song off Are You Experienced, and trying to learn solos and stuff like that. And then pretty quickly got into being a lead guitar player, I suppose, as a kid. So it's kind of been forever now. I don't really remember a time before, but that's when the switch kind of happened, was when I started playing a lot was when I was about 11.
Can you just talk to younger cats about the a lot of people talk about, my niche on social media as a rogue journalist, like, and, everyone's like trying to quantify or figure out how they can upload posts at certain times, even if they're busy. And it's like, there's no logic to new media. Like it gets a bad rap, but for someone like myself, I drive original content, but there's no playbook. There's no book. And I just feel like so many cats in music today, younger cats especially, I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, but millennials and younger, they're so afraid of making a mistake that we've gotten into this huge, I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but at the pop level or just in general, I just see a lot of formula trips in music because people are afraid to take chances and make mistakes. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about the earliest times, of when you really started to cultivate, once you left the head of the tune and you were a lead guitar player, how you learned to improvise. Was there really any methodology to it, or was it, for lack of a better word, just made up?
Probably a little bit of both. I think that there was some bit of methodology because I've always been pretty, I don't know, I was kind of the poster child of an ADD kid, but with the H in there, so I could get hyper focused on certain things.
Yeah, so that's obsessive. I dig that. Yeah,
there was definitely and I still have that. I mean, I'm just lucky that I focused it in. I was lucky that I grew up around all that music with my parents and my brothers and stuff, or else I would have channeled it into video games or
yeah, right. Thank God,
some weird shit. But it went into that. So I mean, from a young age and still now, there's times where 8 hours has gone by and I've been practicing on one thing. That definitely, I mean, I definitely have always been a big, I like a regimen to practice, but for a pure reason. It's because I want to do it. It's not because it's like, I have to do this thing. And
dude, you get immersed in it. Yeah. And you get lost in it. Yeah.
Yeah. I get lost in it and all of a sudden hours have gone by, but it's always with pretty pure intention. It's just because it's something that I really like, not like an ego thing. Like I got to be able to play this faster. I need to impress so-and-so. It's just because it's something I like. So usually that was always the case though too. Like when I first started playing guitar, I mean, I practiced all the time, like constantly practiced. I never learned to read or anything like that, but I knew the theory and understood, scales and modes and just things like that, and was learning solos from records so I could kind of just like repeat things over and over again. And as you repeat things over and over again like that, what this mystical thing happens is as you learn it, you absorb it and you absorb it and you keep playing it, then all of a sudden you really have it internalized or you really get it under your fingers and it starts to slowly morph. You start to do your own thing to it. And then you can on the fly do different permutations of those notes. And all of a sudden you're just doing your own thing. But it's because for me, it's always been because I started on really learning something very precisely or practicing it very obsessively. And then, which, is just repetition or whatever, you're just copying someone else. But in that process, that's where I find that you start to really bloom your own originality because you get that under your fingers. And then by default, all of a sudden you're creating your own thing with it. And, like I said, just changing the order of something. You work on a little guitar lick, and all of a sudden you change around the order of the notes, and you have your own lick. And I mean that's on a very small, easy to bite-sized version of it. But that's kind of how I got. Do
you think that? I mean, you make it sound kind of easy, but isn't there a trap that people can fall into where they don't get it on. What does it mean to get something under your fingers? Because that to me means you're willing to go out and go fishing, so to speak. I mean, you gotta take chances if you're gonna find your own individual voice and
totally.
Yeah. So can you talk? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's just that, you have basically just committed to muscle memory. You're working on something, and it's a real twister on your fingers, and you're not, able to get it, and then you get it to a point where it's in your muscle memory, and you are, confident in that one move or whatever it is, if it's a lick that you're working on or something, and then you have that. But then, yeah, it's really the biggest thing, and I remember a guitar player I used to play with said this, and it stuck with me a lot, was that it's really people's biggest issue with learning to improvise or learning to have their own voice. It's really just comes down to fear. that you think that people care more than they do.
Exactly.
So if you're gonna like take it, I play a lot of instrumental music too, and a lot of like jazz or swing, I guess, for lack of a better term. And the whole thing is improvising. I mean, you play the melody, but then you're trying to embellish on it and do that. And people get so psyched out and in their own head. I've heard it a million times with people that I've taught. They're like, I could put on a play-along track and sound great at my house, and then I go and play a gig and I can't do it. And it really is just comes down to a matter of fear. You think that you're going to get your playing is going to be judged or against someone else's, or there's some unfair or critical ear listening, where really people aren't. People are just usually happy to hear you playing music.
Absolutely. I mean, Rick Danko lives, man. Stage Fright, that's what it is.
Oh, yeah, totally. So it's I think that's the biggest thing that's preventing people from doing it. But
it's fair to say, though, that you were, because you were surrounded by, it was a family. Not a hobby, but it was like it was such a cool thing because you guys could just get around and jam together. I mean, you really didn't have. Did you have any issues with Stage Fright?
No, I really never did. Because I was playing at and maybe it was cracked open because it was so young. Like, the first gigs that I ever played which was funny because the first gigs that I ever played were, until many years later, were the largest gigs I ever played because they were the talent shows in like middle school.
Gee, full auditoriums in Scranton.
A full auditorium. I mean, that's like, I didn't reach that crowd again.
That's so great.
People listening to me playing and I thought of that when I was in, I don't know, not till a long time after. I was probably like 20 or something, and I was like, wait. Until I was playing to a full auditorium, I was like, wait, the last time I did this, I was in like 6th grade. But you don't have any fear when you have much less fear of things like that. You're just pumped to show everybody your thing when you're 11, you're not really, it's like things like that become harder to do if you jump into them later in life. Like, I know, like, my dad, who's a musician but not like professional, he would never in a million years get up in front of people and play. He's too smart now. He knows too much.
That's remarkable because he sounds like the hit. I mean, not that he wasn't a professional musician, but he was obviously competent enough that and passionate enough that his 3 sons became musicians. I'm surprised he just wasn't playing at, like, maybe the VFW or a Fish Fry in Scranton or something,
Yeah, and nothing like that. It was just around the house.
Yeah,
but I think I think that actually, compared to a lot of friends that I've had who were musicians or like, studied classical, or they did their thing, or they were like, maybe came from like a super jazz family and it was like, learn your thing, and like it became a little bit militant and people then turn away from it. The presentation of what music was,
right,
and it still is and has been my whole life. And still, when I go over and see my parents, I always end up playing music with them. But it's just that it's like, it's something that you do because you enjoy it, like in a true like kind of folk sense. But I think because he never did it, he started playing piano when he was, always kind of, there was one in the house. And then when he was in school, he said that, the dorms would always have like a piano room or whatever. So he would just go and figure out, Beatles tunes, John Lennon piano, basically, just kind of simple piano tunes, and never played in bands. So I think when you then get to an older age, you feel those nerves a lot more. It almost reminds me of like, I've just been, my wife, we're thinking about getting a new car at one point here, and I always driven a stick, and she didn't drive a stick. And she was saying to me, she's like, you have to understand, this is scary if you haven't, like, I learned that when I was 16 on an old Wrangler. So I was like, I'm never going to die. I'm just going to drive.
Yo, I got to be honest. I am so in your wife's camp. Dude, I mean, when I was 16, all my parents in Long Island, they drove sticks. I hated them. I never got my license until college. I still won't drive one today. So I really empathize with her.
Totally, and I get it, because if you don't, but when you're kind of even at it, and it falls off not long after that. That fear thing, I think, it comes in a little bit like, and for some people probably at different times, but I think still at 16 you have this like, I'm invincible, you're not going to get in a car accident. You're not going to kill anybody. Like, that's not going to happen. You just are pumped to go and do things and be able to go drive by yourself. So you're like, if driving the stick is the way to do it, then you just do it. But then I think if you try and learn that into your 20s or later on or 30s or whenever, it's like, whoa, I don't want all this control. And you feel scared because you're more like, you have a greater sense of your own mortality. So in a weird way, learning to drive stick later in life is kind of similar to performing.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely
risks.
a nightmare because, I mean, you're on a hill somewhere. I mean, anyway, I don't want to go too deep into that. To me, it's like your dad, though, I mean, you got up on stage at 11, you wanted to strut your stuff. But the point is that you had already been playing in the house for a long time. You were not uncomfortable on the bandstand ever.
Yeah, no, it was never there. Yeah, so yeah, just back to that, and it was never uncomfortable. And there was a couple times I had it later on, a little bit, but it was always in like a weird way. It would be just because of and more of an awkward setting. You know, you play in front of like 10 people in a close room, and you're talking to them, and you get this weird like public speaking nervousness.
Totally.
Because it's not really like stage fright. It's more like when you have to talk in front of people, and when it's less people, it's almost weirder and more uncomfortable than if you had a room of several hundred people, you know, like a little listening room, and all of a sudden, like, you're like talking to people, and it's so very rarely, but I have felt those kind of nerves, but I think that's almost more of like a public speaking thing. Give me a guitar in my hand or sitting behind the piano, and I'll feel, I'm always comfortable, but if I'm just standing there talking, I do feel weird. So I understand. It's a vulnerable thing, you know. It's like people say, like, I'm not a dancer. I've never been. And it's like when people try and get someone to sing who's not a singer, or to perform who's not a performer, it's like a nightmare scenario for them. And I always understand that, because it's a very vulnerable personal thing to sing in front of people or perform your thing in front of people. And dancing is a very similar thing, which I don't do, and I don't do well, and I don't want to do in front of anybody ever, or even in front of myself in the mirror. So if someone tries to be like, oh, come on, it's fun, I'm like, no, you don't understand.
I just think everybody has their own. No, I'm with you, man. I mean, yeah. Everybody has their own rhythm. Everyone has their own time feel. But yeah, I mean, you know, Roy, I kind of wanted for you to talk about one thing that I'm sort of in my own little bubble. One thing that is becoming very apparent to me in this new paradigm, so to speak, in our at least in this country. And I just wanted you to talk or let me know if I'm accurate or not. I mean, I'm not talking about local skinny dentists or the gigs that you guys have that you've locked down, you know, that you play at. I'm just saying, as far as a domestic touring situation, I am deeply concerned. Obviously, we're in like a seriously deep-ish, you know, just like the country itself is just, it's not healthy, period. But I'm looking at it now and I'm like, okay, so you can have Dead cover bands, and you can have David Bowie cover bands, and you can have people that are basically, the question is this: how worried, not necessarily about you specifically, but is it me, or is original music almost, how long is it going to take for original music to come back into a domestic touring situation for people that don't necessarily have big name recognition? I mean, I'm looking at bands that, you know, like Circles, for instance, that John Lee just joined. I mean, they do like 10 shows or 9 shows in 10 days. They have a little carved out tour, but I'm just like, I don't care about Journey. I don't care about Steve Miller. I don't care about Dead and Company. I'm done with that shit. Like what? I mean, and what I'm saying is, I also understand in the greed capitalist manifesto that, you know, a lot of these clubs have lost money, so they have to bring in recognizable music in order to meet the bottom line. But I just wanted you to tell me if I'm nuts or if you feel that too.
No, I think that's definitely true. I mean, I think I was just talking to a buddy about it the other day. who's a drummer that I play with all the time and is awesome. And two of my friends are in this project, and they're talking about the amount of money that they get offered. They just because they love it, they started years ago this thing called Tom Petty Appreciation Band,
Right.
and it was just like I don't know. They would do a thing a couple times a year at our buddy's bar, around Christmas or Thanksgiving when everyone was around, and they would like do it. And it's just funny how they're like they get offered more work and money to do that than anything else they've ever done.
Exactly.
Like all these like series, right?
Exactly.
And they love, and I do too. I mean, I love Tom Petty, and so do they. So much so that they and the band's awesome. The guy sings the tunes. I mean, they kill it. But the point is it's kind of funny because they actually don't really give a shit about it. I mean, it's just a cover band.
Exactly.
But it's weird. I don't know. We're stuck in a strange, and I'm guilty of it too, because a lot of music that I love, definitely not all of it, but a lot of songwriter music that I love, like rock and roll and songwriter music I love, is from before my generation. But I'm not alone in that. I think that there's a ton of people. But the thing is that because a lot of the stuff, not all of the stuff, I also want to just preface this with, I love all sorts of music. I mean, I'm obsessed with trad Irish fiddle music and old time music and gypsy music.
Oh, you're all over the place. Yeah.
I'm all over the place. But if we're talking about like rock bands and like original kind of like songwriters stuff, which I also love, I definitely love things that are from most of the things that I listen to on a regular basis are from the 60s and 70s. And not all, but a lot of it are. And
absolutely.
I think that it's because it was a new thing then. I mean, that's something that's hard to realize right now. And when you make music that's like that, it's like that stuff was so good, and it also was new. I mean, the genre of rock and roll was only not even 10 years old, and even that, it was like so different. Like you think about the Beatles going from Love Me Do to Sgt. Pepper. I mean, that if you were a freshman in high school when Love Me Do came out, you would have been a senior and they would have been putting out like Strawberry Fields and like the White Album. I mean, that's insane. That's completely insane. And there hasn't been anything that transformative. And then even from there to like a few years later, right? If you just take like 65 to 75, or I don't know, 63 to 73, like that 10-year period, and the growth in music that happened and the amount of influential music that came from that period, there hasn't been any kind of shift like that since. And it's hard for people to it's hard to try and not recreate that. And I'm guilty of it because I like writing music that feels like it's, Randy Newman or whatever, but I'm like, shit, in my mind, I'm kind of like, well, this is kind of, it's been done.
Right.
And it was done by Randy Newman already. It was like, you're not really going to beat, good old boys. So it's really, it's a hard hurdle to get past. I think that's kind of a part of it. I might be rambling here a little bit, but
what I wanted to ask you about is truthfully, like, I'm just, what it is. I like, there's so many reasons, and a lot of them relate to just the ability of human beings with budgets to be in the studio. That's why so much great music was made. Then it became very anonymous. The efficiency model came in, the drum track, and that speaks to, but I just wonder about the ability, like for you in particular, like, I mean, before the pandemic, were there opportunities to tour across the country? What is the opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, there's quite a few bands that I tour with. I mean, I probably shoot myself in the foot with it because I don't really care about being famous. So I just but I play with other people's projects and I was doing, my year, man, I did it because I had to do some paperwork for stuff. And I looked at my year of touring the year before the pandemic, and it was insane. I did so much stuff. It was like with a bunch of different projects. So I mean, yeah, that obviously is all halted, which is bad. And
let me ask you a question. Let's just stop there. And out of these projects, how much was original music?
All of it.
All of it. And you probably played 200 plus shows the year before the pandemic.
Yeah, and it was all original.
Original, and now it's halted. So I just want to be naive and say, explain how we can unhalt it. Is it just merely I don't know, man. Like that's my fear is that you're not alone. Listen, nobody was, all the cats that I love, nobody's on the famous wagon. They just want to play and play the good music and get people off and tour. But man, I mean, like I just, what is it going to take in your mind's eye to get the show, to get things moving again? That's sort of the vexing part for me, is just like, I am so done with seeing, like, it's just like, oh, we have to meet the bottom line. We just have to bring in music people know. I'm tired of that. Like the comping stuff is really, it's so over. I'd rather see someone get up there and just play their ass off and play original stuff or be themselves. And I just wonder, like, I'm sure it's been good, family and being able to stay home and not have to be a road dog. But still, you're a perfect person to ask is, what is it going to take? Do you see any tea leaves that suggest that some of this stuff might be able to be get back on the road?
Yeah, I mean, I unfortunately, I feel like it's probably just has to. I think we're getting closer, but I think a lot of it just has to come down to, like, when everyone is, like, comfortable with, going back inside and doing stuff, which I think I don't know anything. I'm not a political guy.
Hey, man, I'm already there, man. I mean, that's a whole.
Well, I think it's. Yeah. But I think that's probably the biggest.
Mm-hmm.
I think is like one of the biggest parts is just like, okay, when are, like, is everyone going to be cool with, like, okay, we're going on tour, like there's not like a huge, like, risk, with COVID and everything like that. But I feel like that's probably the biggest one. I would think is that. And I also wonder if a lot of people too, like I have some friends who work that own restaurants and stuff like that. They're having a hard time getting people back to work.
Right.
Well, one is because everyone was making more money with unemployment than they were previous. But apart from that, they're having a hard time getting people back because people might have been a bartender, or now I'm going to relate this to music too, but like might have been doing something like that where they were up, being at work until getting home at 4 a.m. and doing that, and then they maybe found a different way of life or another way of doing stuff that they're like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I wonder if there's not also musicians who are like that were like, wait, maybe I don't really I want to make money making music and be fulfilled, but like I think some people maybe don't want to tour as much because they kind of stopped the crazy stuff going all the time and then stopped for a year and a half or two and are kind of like, oh wait, maybe I just want to do like some long weekends here and there.
That's right. No, I think you're spot on. I think can you talk about right now for you, the live music experience? I mean, I've been to several shows. I mean, I'm pretty selective about the bands that I want to go see, but I've been at Wash, Inhumanity, in California, in Idaho, in Boise, and so I just feel like there's this, and I try to steer clear of the political stuff too. I do feel like this collective unconscious, this sort of collective, we're all sort of suffering in our own way from this post-traumatic, this trauma that's ensued, and rightfully so. There's been a lot of carnage and death. It's just the longer that it atrophies, the harder it is to get the train rolling again. That's the only thing and that, so there's a sense of urgency for me. And I'm only talking about cats that are like, authentic creatives and originalials. I mean, I think that
right, and who aren't already that famous.
Exactly. Like it's nice if you can. Yeah,
if you're in a middle ground, it is devastating for like the middle ground bands because I remember this guy. I don't know if I'm not sure if you know this guy, Sam Ryder. He's a guy I play with.
Yeah.
He's great. I mean, he's one of the people that I tour with the most, and he made that point, in the middle of, he's like, it's not going to be, and he's got a great career. We do all sorts of great festivals and things, but he's not he's not in the highest echelon by any means either. But he's like, when things do start opening back up, it's like, you don't just book these tours. Like you have to book them maybe almost a year in advance. And also as places do start to open, they're probably going to want more of the, if it's an acoustic music thing, like kind of where his reference was like, they're going to be going after like the Sarah Jarosz or the Punch Brothers or more established,
exactly,
acts first. So that was what he was saying. I remember almost a year ago. He's like, it's going to be a while because, and I've been playing with him. We've been doing stuff. I have been going and doing shows with him, but it's not as much as it was before. Just more some long weekends and stuff. But he was saying things to that effect. Just that it takes a while. You don't just book them. You got to book them like way long in advance. And there's all these logistics of booking flights and hotels and transportation and. You're working on momentum and stuff a lot with mid-level bands. You're really trying to
absolutely, dude,
keep
totally,
people
bro.
going, and you're just trying to get this new agent and this thing and this booking. Okay, we got this. Okay, we just played that town 5 months ago. Okay, now we're back and we're doing this, and that all came to a halt. So it's really hard to start back up from zero.
That's it. You really nailed it, man. And I just don't. And I just talking to Roy Williams here on the Jake Feinberg Show. We have a game on this program called. Name That Voice. Don't expect you to know who it is, but pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
I'm a Bible man. I'm a Bible student. And what I admire the most is the statements that stick with me and become part of my life. One of them is that every man has his gift of God or his proper gift of God. Something like in that kind of statement, that form, and I perceive it in people. There are no two people alike, even though they try, because we learn from our masters in front of us. They're the teachers, so we learn everything we can learn from them, but we don't end up sounding like them. Our personality comes from how much energy we put into it. So if you put it in, you're going to get it out. But it is there. Our Creator has given us the ability to do a lot of things that you can branch off. Ron Carter said to me one day, he said to one of his friends, he said, man, George Benson could have been a scientist or a doctor or anything he wanted to be, because those things branch off into different directions, there's a lot of mathematics in music. I'm not a mathematician, and I don't like blood. I'm scared to death when I see blood. I don't like it. So I know I couldn't be a doctor. A scientist, yeah. I channeled it through my music and invented some things that had not been done on the guitar. And how I did it was I asked myself a question. How come Montgomery didn't figure this out? How come he didn't do it like this? Why didn't he add this note over here to his octaves? And I said, well, there's nothing to prevent you from doing it. So,
I dig, man.
So I jumped on it.
I dig it, man.
Years later, it turned out to be a staple in my playing, without me even trying to force it in. I just kept doing it, and pretty soon people began to notice it, and it became part of what they're calling the George Benson sound, or whatever that means. It became part of my personality, and that's about as close as I can get to. I think about one statement that someone said about. I know who it was. It was Elvin Jones who said this about John Coltrane. He said, man, it was like God sent us an angel, and he stayed with us a little while, and then he disappeared. That's what he said about John Coltrane. I thought that was pretty profound. I mean, I don't think in that direction because all of us come from the same God. But I like his assessment of John Coltrane not being ordinary.
All right, I didn't realize he gave it away quite a few times in that. That was my interview with George Benson from 2017. And, Roy, I wanted to just ask you a couple questions.
I knew it was him before, though. Before he said it.
You did.
I was going to say, as soon as we got back, I was going to be like, yeah, I recognize I recognize.
I was like, dude, he said he third personed himself like 9 times in that clip. But
right. And then he finally brought it back to the first person. But before he did that, I was like, I think this is George Benson.
Well, you're spot on. So, it was the last part of that whole thing where he talked about Elvin saying that Train was this angel who came here for a little while and then he disappeared. He was not ordinary and he was only here for a little while. And I just wonder, if there's a cat out there that has that sort of resonates for you in that way, where they can't their impact either on you personally and the music was so strong, and then like that they were in the next life. If there was someone like that in your life.
I don't think. I mean, there's been people. I mean, I think that type of sentiment sometimes goes to people who die an untimely death. You know,
sure.
They're like that. So I mean, I fortunately all the great musicians that I've got to know or I've got to play with are still here. I mean, I do have that feeling about some people where I just feel like they're touched by something.
Well, can you talk about, even if they're still here, who's somebody that's an angel,
a real vessel of the instrument?
Yes,
type of person. I think one that first comes to mind, super influential on me from playing with him to just hanging with him a bunch and knowing him well over the years, is Jim Campolongo, the Telecaster player.
Wow. Talk
Jim's
about him.
Ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He just has it. It's weird. There's just so many of the guitar world is, there's people you can't beat with their technical abilities, some of whom are just technical and some who are technical and great. Like, I don't know if you know this guy, Julian Lage, but like.
Oh yeah. No, I'm trying to, Samson Grisman, David's son, is trying to hook me up. That guy's insane, man.
Totally insane. Yeah. Oh yeah. Sam's a friend of mine.
Yeah. Oh, really cool.
Yeah. And but he's great too, because he's like, technically unmatched, and he's also very like his playing.
Yeah, great feel, great time. Great. Yeah, great feel.
Yeah, and it's like in his melodies, he's just great, But then there's also people I don't want to name names, but there are definitely people who are just technical and have a name, but they're just kind of like,
Yeah, no, it's like riffology, it's not necessary. Yeah,
it's for sport,
Right,
right. Yeah, you can play fast. That's like powerlifting or something like that. You can learn to do that. You can learn to run fast or do that. It's not really the same. There's a different thing when it comes to making music, but I think that, and Jim is one of them for sure, of the people that doesn't even matter. I mean, he does play some stuff that's like, there's a level of virtuosity in his playing, but it's in a sneaky way. It's like he can bend like double stops, like very in tune.
Right.
But like, that's something that's not like speed. That's just like grace, it's like, and he has that in a lot of different things with his playing but it's kind of what I like about him is like, he's like a blue collar guitar player. Like, you're watching him play and you're kind of rooting for him. It's like he might, like, he does do some quick little things, and he's got his moves that you're like, whoa, wow, that was really good.
He always pulls it off. Yeah, totally. I get it, but it's not. You're not always sure.
He always lands it.
Yeah, I do.
The only way I can describe it is you're kind of rooting for him when he's playing, and it's relatable. It doesn't make you go and see Jim, and we used to go religiously, like myself and like all the best musicians I knew in New York would go, and we would go and watch him play on Monday nights. And it was like, we'd always say, like, you go and see Jim play, and like, you're inspired to play music. It makes you like, it makes you want to play, whereas certain guitar players, it make you want to burn your guitar, because you're just like, there's no point. Like, they're already so good, and, and it kind of makes you feel defeated. But like, Jim has just got this way about him in his playing that's it's more inspiring than the opposite.
Well, let me ask you, man. I mean, I want to ask you though. I mean, like Benson. I mean, Wes Montgomery didn't even know the notes he was playing. Joe Sample, when I interviewed him, showed up at his house, and he's like, "How did you play that chord?" He's like, "I have no idea." Like, I mean, there's just some people that are it's just coming through them, and the innocence is very attractive and that kind of stuff. And but what Benson was saying was, how come Montgomery didn't do this? And then eventually he started to develop these individual, you want to call it stylistic kind of things. I just wonder about you in particular, if you can talk a little bit about things. Yeah, okay, we don't need the Roy Williams, book at Berklee School of Music, but what are some of these little niche things that you've done on the guitar that you can say that your voice shines through when you do them?
I think if I had to talk about myself,
that's fine.
But if I did, I do think that what I try and bring to the table with playing guitar and as like an improviser, and what I wish I heard more people do, and I don't think too many people do it, is it doesn't matter. You're playing music, so it doesn't matter what style of music you're playing. And oftentimes I hear a guitar, like I play a lot of jazz music, but it doesn't mean that I have to play like a big jazz box and roll the tone knob all the way off. Like it's like, or if you're playing like, you know, whatever style, like you don't have to just play like that thing, you know, you could be playing gypsy music like Django Reinhardt, but like that doesn't mean that you can't incorporate like some country guitar into that, you know? So I think that what I try and do when I'm improvising is just, it's like you have a palette, you know, and the more broad your palette is, or the more colors you have to choose from, the more expressive you can be in what you're going to put on top of whatever you're playing on. So I try and not just think, okay, I'm playing a jazz tune, so I'm going to do like my Joe Pass sound and only do that. It's like, there's so many things I love, you know, I love Neil Young too. So,
Right.
you know, maybe I just want to like get trebly and hang out on one note for a while. And, you know, or maybe I do want to kind of go right into the, like, you know, George Benson kind of thing, or the Wes Montgomery octave, you know, or something that is very much in the jazz thing. But I think that that's something that I try and do, is just play music regardless of what genre it is and what tone you're supposed to have, because you're playing that music, you know. That's the one that always gets me, is jazz. It's like, why is that? When did it happen that I was just watching some video and it's like, at what point did it happen that all like jazz, electric jazz guitar players, or a lot, I should say, 'cause not all, but most are just like, okay, this is the tone that electric guitar has.
Absolutely. I don't know where. Yeah, exactly. I don't get it. I don't get it.
It's happened some point in like the 50s, I guess. I don't know when, but at some point there was like this is what you do when you play an electric guitar in a jazz band. You kind of play this polite sound with your tone knob rolled off, and everyone plays this same type of big jazz box. It's like, well, what about like I play a Strat in my, or a Jazz Master or a Telecaster. It doesn't matter. Like,
exactly. It's perfect, man. It's just, you know, I think we're saturated with material. We're saturated today more so than, I guess that was the other question I had for two-part question is, did you learn by ear? You were an autodidact, and then that's a yes or no. And then ultimately, did you ever reach a point in your career, or even now, where you just stopped listening to a lot of music because you didn't want to start sounding like other people? I remember Jerry Granelli, the great, rest in peace, the great drummer with Vince Guaraldi. They had some very experimental bands out in San Francisco, like even before, you know, jazz, but they were playing like almost like, I mean, with light, it was the light sound dimension stuff. And I remember they were talking like, you know, Miles just put out a new record. They're like, yeah, I didn't buy it, because they didn't want to be influenced by the other cats. And I just wonder if there was a point when you actually just stopped so you could really just hear your own voice.
Yeah. Well, it's, so the first question about did I learn by ear?
Yeah.
Yeah. I did. And I learned by ear. And at one point in high school, I took like a music theory class. So I know the notes. You know, if I have to I can't sight read by any means, but I get it enough. If I had to like see what a note is, I mean, I know, but I'm still going, every good boy does. Okay, it's a D. You know, like
totally.
I like saying my acronyms out loud. So yeah, I learned by ear in that way for sure. And then I did learn, but I was intrigued always with just to follow up on that, is that I've always been intrigued by like theory and why things work. So I have a pretty good understanding of why. I mean, it's not nearly like a lot of people, I'm sure, but I know why chords work and what, you know, relationships things have. And that kind of happens by default if you're going to get into like a lot of guitar soloing and improvising. You just start stumbling on those. You're like, oh, weird, I can play this minor chord over that seventh chord and it still kind of works. And it's like, I didn't like nerd out on it. I just kind of discovered those through playing. Where
absolutely, totally. I think it's very smart.
Substitution, I suppose, you know. But I didn't like read about, if you play the fifth below dominant seventh chord, that arpeggio will work if you impose it over the dominant seventh. You know, I never learned it that way. I just kind of played and then was like, oh, whoa, okay, that kind of works if I play that over this and this over that. And So I learned theory, but I think in a pretty it wasn't like I read books on it. I just kind of like learned it because I play all the time. And then you remember, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that one time I played that E minor over that A7 and that kind of worked cool, you know, and then, okay, so if I can do that, I can play a B minor over an E7, you know, and then in a natural way. But anyway, so that's the answer to the first question. And the second one is weird that you're saying that because you asked that question because I'm sitting in I have a studio here, but also I'm in the room next to it that has like a record player. And I was like, I don't know the last time I listened to a record.
Wow.
I don't listen to music.
That's what I want. No, so explain why. This is really important because I'm talking about older cats. I can't remember who it was, and they just were like, I stopped listening to other people. So explain that. Because it's not like you're disenchanted or that you don't love all music, but why?
No, not even. Yeah, the opposite. It's weird. So I think that I listened to so much music growing up, and I'd always have it on. I'd always listen to music in the car. One thing is that I don't like music as background. I never have. It distracts me. I think that goes back to this
ADHD. Yeah, no doubt.
I can't. If the music is on and you're in a car, it's like it's one or the other. Either we're talking or I'm like,
no, we're blasting and raging. There's no background. Yeah, there's no
in between. And it's always been that way. It just distracts me when I'm hanging out, and especially if I'm in a restaurant or something, and there's like music that I don't like on. That's enough to make me leave. Like I'll ruin my time. If there's that thing now with music that cicada sounding like. You know that rhythm thing that happens in trap beat music?
Yeah.
And I like all sorts of stuff. It's not like, oh, well, there's new kids music or whatever. It's stupid. It sounds so bad. And I hear that and it's like poison to my ears and I have to leave wherever I am if that sound is on. Or even if I hear like a car in traffic next to me with that on, I'm like, it drives me nuts. Because it's just some weird machine. It's not like it's no human beings. But I like electronic stuff too. It's not even that.
No, of course I get it. But it's grating though. It's just it's
grating. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of the music thing, there's one exception to it, and that is if I get really obsessed with something. So I got into over the pandemic. I got really into learning like Irish and old time, but a lot of Irish fiddle music.
Yes.
Like, really old music. And I was listening to a lot. I did during that time a lot because I was learning tunes. Because I was learning, there's a very specific goal in mind. It's like, I want to learn these tunes and I want to learn the vocabulary. So I was listening to a lot of Kevin Burke, who's like one of my favorite fiddlers. But that was like, that happens once in a blue moon. Like, every few years I get so obsessed with one thing and it's like in order to absorb this I'm like I want to learn that tune so I listen to it so I can learn it, but it's different. It's almost like it's more of like a studious type of listening. It's never just like, oh, I'm going to put that on in the background. But other than that, and that, like I said, that is very rare. I just don't listen to music. I haven't in years. I don't. In the car, I put on music, but it's like if I just flip through like bizarro radio stations, I'll put on pop country or I'll put on like. I record a lot, so I'm fascinated by like production, even in music that I don't like. So I'll just like, apart from that one weird cicada rhythm, I will even just like flip through whatever, like from classic rock to anything. I'll put on scan, but I won't like seek out any kind of music. I'll listen to talk radio or nothing,
Absolutely. No, I mean, I want to ask you though, explain to the layperson about how that keeps you uncluttered merely from like tonality or just like style or just keeping your own. I mean, you clearly have a big palette. You have a lot of ideas, but you kind of like that spontaneity of showing up on the gig and not knowing what's going to come out of you. But does it help you just keep some clutter out of your life by not listening to music?
Yeah, definitely. That's been a big part of it, and I feel like as I'm explaining this, it's like, oh, it does sound like he listens to music. It's like I really don't.
No, I dig.
I put on the radio. It's just like
it's hard to avoid
to be like, oh, I wonder what's going on in the world right now. But I never put anything on because I think I don't really think about why, but when I do have to decipher why, it's that exactly. I think that when I do listen to like a jazz guitar player album, I never do. People be like, oh, do you know that George Benson record? Do you know that thing? I'm like, I can't listen to it because unless it's like something that's super inspiring to me, it's usually discouraging to me, or I feel like it's too I don't want to be too influenced by it. And that's the case with like, there's a guy that I love out right now, a contemporary that I think is a brilliant like writer of all sorts of genres. And he's great. This guy, Daniel Romano. I don't know if you ever heard of Daniel Romano. But he's great. I mean, check him out. He's really great, but yeah. I can't, and I have friends who love him, and like my wife loves his music too. And like, she'll be like, "Did you hear that new record?" I'm like, "Yeah, I listen to it a little bit, but I can't like go too far in. It's like, I don't want to, because I can get the vibe, and I can get that I love it without like I don't have time to let it take over. I don't have time.
No, you just nailed it. You do not want it to have an over too much of an impact on your own thing, you know?
Yeah, I don't want, and I'm too busy, because if I'm not, first of all, I play music all day long. Like, I wake up, I get a coffee, and I start playing some instrument, or I start recording, and I literally do that the entire day. I took a break to have this phone call, and then I have a guy coming over, and we're going to be working on some tunes, and then I'm going to like fall asleep later. That's just what I do, and it's what I've done my whole life. I just don't even have time to. And it's by design. It's not that I'm like it's not like I have some crazy job. I mean, I do a lot of recording work for people, but it's like I enjoy it. But I purposely fill up my day with, okay, if I'm done with this thing, I'm not going to sit around. If I finish this thing that I'm working on for this person, they want me to record pedal steel on a track, and that takes me a couple hours to get that done, then I'm going to spend the next 2 hours before dinner like practicing my fiddle, and then after dinner we're going to go for a walk, and then we're going to come home and go to bed.
Dude, this is the greatest life I've ever heard of.
Moments happen. The only time those moments happen are maybe in the car, and I can't do. I mean, I got it because a friend of mine that I was playing with, and it's really useful for. I got a Spotify account on my phone because I do like the feature of like playlists. So like, we're working on these tunes or something, or like we want to do this thing or whatever, here, check these out or whatever. And I listen to them. So I got it for that reason. But generally speaking, like when I was younger, when, you know, iPods and stuff like that came out, I could never have one. I couldn't deal with the endless, like, or I'm driving. My worst nightmare is riding in the car with someone and they're like, "Oh, pick something to put on." I'm like,
no, you know what? Next time, but I just want to be very good. The Jake Feinberg Show is on Spotify, so the next time you can go through any of the episodes and just listen to any interview there. You know, right there. You don't know music.
No, that's great. Yeah. That's cool. I like that kind of stuff. I can get down on long rides. This is hilarious, actually, because my wife had been laughing about it. We just got married not long ago, but we went. Our like honeymoon was basically just like a drive all over the West. Like we flew into Vegas, actually played a festival, or I had a gig on the honeymoon. With mutual friends of ours, so it was cool. We played in Bishop, California, right on the Eastern Sierras there. Wow. But we drove a long way. Like we drove from Las Vegas up, you know, all the way up to Bishop and all around. We went in Yosemite for a few days. We went to Big Sur. We came all the way back down through California and back out to the Grand Canyon. I mean, it was a driving trip and beautiful. We did not listen to any music the entire time.
That is amazing. Because there
was one time we did, and because we listened to, and this is, I'm telling you, like we drove like 3,000 miles, and I didn't listen to any music except for we listened to some isolated Beach Boys vocals.
You know, I was going to say, because the imagery there in that, I mean, I live in Tucson, but part of that magic is, but I respect it. I mean, to me, you know what it is? I mean, music has become a completely healing force. Spiritual music, it doesn't matter what genre, has become a healing force in my life. And, you know, Roy, I'm backed up against another interview, but I really want to do set 2 with you. I feel like we just really scratched the surface here, man. And I really wanted to let you know that, you know, you're just to continue to stay the course and keep creating a positive impact in your world, man, because it's incredible how much I took for granted, and everybody did before the pandemic. Every major city in the world had multiple live music events going on every night. And even though it was a screwed up world before the pandemic, that raised the frequencies and the overall universal vibration. And the fact that we've had such a limited amount of live music in the world now, the vibration is so low, and it's really important that cats like you continue to inspire in your own world, man, so that we keep the pulse going, because without that, I just don't want it to, within darkness there is light. So, we'll be in touch.
There's no choice. I have no choice.
You do no. You listen. You. This is your purpose and life path. I'm just saying, don't ever think
keep doing it for right or wrong.
Yeah, man. I don't need to give you any pep talk. I'm just saying thank you for your what you do, and let's do set 2 real soon. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to continuing. I know you're right. We just got into it. The whole thing was great, but I feel like
we just started to really cook right now. We just burned for 57 minutes, but the last 20 you were on fire.
Well, great, man.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate it, Jake, and I'll talk to you soon.
I'll have this up later tonight too. Much love to you, man, and be cool, be safe.
You too. Take care.
Later, man.
Bye.
Bye. And we'll be back with Scott Metzger right after this.